Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into something that is hiding right beneath the surface of everyday life. We're looking at America's forgotten citizens. You know, these are the folks who clean the offices, deliver our food, care for our elderly, drive the trucks. They literally hold the entire country together while slowly, quietly falling apart themselves.
I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine waking up at 4:30 in the morning, working 2 jobs, skipping meals, and despite all that, still being just one single emergency away from homelessness. In the richest nation on earth, we have millions of people who aren't unemployed. They are working every single day. But they just can't survive comfortably, they can't survive securely, and honestly, sometimes they can't even survive with basic dignity.
So let's get right into part 1, the invisible American crisis.
To really unpack this, we've got to realize that this hidden phenomenon isn't just some mathematical error or economic glitch. It is a profound psychological and moral crisis that's spreading across the country like wildfire. And the scariest part? Most of us don't even realize how close we are to it. For decades, the American dream came with a pretty simple promise, right? If you work hard, you can build a better life. But today, millions are waking up to a totally different reality, where hard work just doesn't guarantee stability anymore. A full-time job doesn't guarantee you can make rent. A degree doesn't guarantee security. And being hyper-productive absolutely does not guarantee a life free from that constant looming panic.
Which brings us to a really core question. Who are the working poor?
To truly grasp this, we need to zoom in on the human element. Because modern poverty, it doesn't always look like poverty, it's often hiding in plain sight. Take the single mother, for example, who's desperately trying to hold everything together. She's working a morning shift at a diner, an evening shift cleaning offices, and barely even sees her kids awake. Every single month is a mathematical emergency. Rent, medicine, gas, groceries. Center-based childcare alone can eat up 20 to 30% of a working family's income. It makes it mathematically impossible to get ahead. A full-time job no longer guarantees a roof, a second job no longer guarantees food on the table, and literally one unexpected medical bill, even just a couple $100, can completely destroy everything. It is a relentless, breathless race just to stay in the exact same spot.
Then you've got the young graduate. They step into adulthood already buried under an absolute mountain of student debt, averaging over 30 grand before they've even cashed their first real paycheck. Rent completely devours the rest of their income, and healthcare feels like a total pipe dream. But here's the kicker. Modern culture pressures this generation into hiding their financial struggles, so they're silently falling behind, masking all that anxiety and deep exhaustion behind a perfectly curated, flawless social media highlight reel, pretending everything is totally fine when fundamentally it is not.
And then we see the elderly worker. Picture someone who's 72 years old. They spent decades contributing to society. They did everything right, but their retirement savings? Completely wiped out by inflation and economic instability, slashing their purchasing power exactly when they need it most. Now, they're working retail, pushing through aching physical pain just to survive. The tragedy here is just immense. After a lifetime of labor, the thought of stopping work actually feels more dangerous to them than continuing to push their aging body to the absolute breaking point.
So how did we actually get here? Let's zoom out and look at the 5 root causes driving all this.
Root cause number 1 is the massive cost of living explosion. Over the last few decades, worker productivity absolutely surged. We got faster, we got vastly more efficient. In fact, since the late 70s, productivity shot up over 60%. But typical worker compensation? It's barely moved an inch when you factor in inflation. Corporate wealth skyrocketed, but wages for everyday folks totally stagnated. Housing, healthcare, education, groceries, the whole shebang got so much more expensive. Crazy enough, human labor became pretty much the only thing in the economy that didn't go up in price.
Moving on to cause number 2, we absolutely have to talk about our extreme work culture. We live in a society that just fiercely glorifies burnout, don't we? Rise and grind, hustle harder, no days off. We've somehow rebranded sheer exhaustion as a badge of honor and framed rest as laziness. But guys, human beings were not designed to live under constant, unyielding economic pressure. You're basically volunteering to break down your own biology. Eventually, living in that permanent state of hyperarousal and stress just causes the human nervous system to completely snap.
And this illustrates root cause number 3 perfectly, the housing crisis.
In major cities and even increasingly in rural areas, everyday workers are throwing over 50% of their income at rent alone. When half your pie is gone just to keep a roof over your head, that leaves absolutely nothing for savings, for healthcare, for emergencies, or just basic stability. When shelter itself becomes this uncertain luxury instead of a baseline right, fear becomes your permanent state of mind.
Because number 4 brings us to technology and the gig economy. Now, the gig economy promised us all this freedom, right? Be your own boss, set your own hours. But for millions of people, it delivered deep unpredictability instead. We're now in a world where a literal algorithm dictates a worker's ability to pay their rent. No guaranteed hours, no employer-sponsored healthcare, no retirement net. It essentially turns human labor into just on-demand data points, which creates severe financial instability and this profound sense of isolation.
Which leads right into cause number 5, the decline of social trust and community. Back in the day, America had these strong community structures, neighborhoods, civic groups, multi-generational networks that caught you when you fell. Today, those bonds have seriously deteriorated. Millions of people are now facing these crushing economic struggles entirely alone. They're suffering in private, which turns loneliness into a massive, hidden public health crisis all on its own. And isolated people, well, they're just much easier to exhaust.
Now, let's look at Section 3, the hidden cost of survival.
We really need to look at how all of this builds into something even more damaging, the severe psychological toll of millions of people living in permanent survival mode. When survival mode takes over, it physically alters the brain. It breeds deep feelings of inferiority, constant anxiety, emotional exhaustion, depression, and incredibly low self-worth. And one of the most heartbreaking parts of this crisis, the intense shame. People blame themselves. They compare their messy, terrifying behind-the-scenes reality to everyone else's highlight reels. Since modern society tends to measure human value by income and status rather than character, it leaves our whole society feeling spiritually empty.
But this damage extends way past the individual. Think about what society as a whole risks losing. We lose social trust, family stability, national unity, psychological resilience, and ultimately our collective faith in the future. Because when citizens stop believing that hard work actually leads to dignity, the very emotional foundation of the country starts to crumble. History shows us this impartial truth over and over. A society that ignores its struggling workers is eventually going to face instability. It doesn't happen suddenly, it happens very slowly, and then all at once. All right, let's move to our final section, reclaiming the American dream. Despite this incredibly heavy reality, I want to be clear. The situation is absolutely not hopeless. Change is possible, and actionable solutions really do exist at every level. Economically, we need systemic shifts. Things like expanding affordable housing, protecting wages so they actually match the real cost of living, and making healthcare accessible. Culturally, we've got to stop glorifying burnout. We are human beings, not machines. At the community level, we have to deliberately rebuild local trust and genuine human connection. And on a personal level, we need to resist those destructive cultural pressures, focusing on real resilience and deep relationships over short-term appearances. Because at the end of the day, we have to completely redefine what success actually looks like. Real wealth means peace, security, health, purpose, and having people who genuinely care about you. We've got to remember that the hardworking folks holding our society together, the ones stocking the grocery shelves, teaching the kids, delivering the packages, they aren't lazy, they're just exhausted. And they're not hopeless, they are just unheard.
So it leaves us with this final thought. Is the American dream still alive for ordinary working people, or has survival simply replaced opportunity? A civilization is ultimately judged not by the wealth of its elites, but by the dignity of its ordinary people. We really have to look past the wealth at the top and start noticing the people holding the foundation up. I challenge you to think about this. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and never stop questioning the realities that society learns to ignore.